So, how does it feel to be sitting in church? Is it okay? Right? Is it better than sitting in front of the computer? You think? All right. Okay. Am I more annoying in person, or am I more annoying on the internet? Because I can't figure that out. Because when I watch myself on the internet, I find myself much more annoying there. So I don't know what that's all about. I don't know. That's the thing. I think that's it, right? I can be really critical watching myself. Where I'm doing it, I'm not critical at all, right? Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about water. And I had this funny image because I think I told some of you this before in church one Sunday. Years and years ago, I did a Lenten theme that was all based on water. And I thought it'd be really nice in church if we had a fountain. And we would play that every Sunday, like we'd put this fountain. It was really nice. We had it on a communion table, and all through the service, there was the lovely sound of running, rushing water trickling down, right? And I noticed as church was going on that all the males over 65 were all getting up and leaving periodically during the service. Somebody come up to me afterwards and goes, "That was the stupidest idea I've ever heard of." So when I was thinking of this morning, I thought, no fountain, not even any sounds of running water. We'll just use our imaginations. Never know, because I'm just on the cusp of 65. I wouldn't want to have to leave myself in the middle of the service here. So agua, of course, Spanish word for water, off the Latin derivative for water. This is the passage that Courtney read from Matthew. It's in a continuation of all these really diverse little passages. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me. So anyone who welcomes someone in the name of Christ welcomes you, right? Also welcomes Christ and welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. Whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. Now, those are interesting ones because those are churchy kinds of things, right? The Jehovah's Witnesses go on that idea, right? That if you go to their house and you welcome them, then you have earned their trust. They come back and they go back and report that they have been welcomed as a prophet or a teacher. But if you scorn them, they also receive a reward when they go back, right? Because you've not recognized the truth. Those are based on passages like this. Right? And those are the days when the disciples and the apostles went out and went from home to home trying to convert people to Christ. But this is interesting in an arid land, right, where water is scarce. Right? So water is an important commodity. So for us here, it's not as big a deal. If anyone gives me or gives you a cup of water, a cup of cold water, their reward will be great. Now, do you have any idea what the reward is? Because we always think in terms of money, right? Well, it's kind of a salvation thing, right? Your reward will be great in heaven, right? You will have a special place because you have acknowledged the presence of God on earth. Water itself is a fascinating thing. Everybody here like water? Yeah. You like to sit by water? Like to play in water? Right? You like occasional shower? Right? Or bath or whatever you happen to do. Do you ever worry about not having water? Yeah. Okay. But it's an uncommon thing for Canadians, isn't it, to worry about the lack of water. We live in a house now where the whole system, like we have a well and a septic system, so everything is driven by power. So if the power goes off, guess what? No water, right? And the power has gone off. And so it's interesting, you go into all these development strategies as to, what am I going to do to flush the toilet, right? And I'm like, it's okay, we have a hot tub and a bucket. Right? Strategy number one, right? That problem is solved. Number two, I just went out and bought a big generator, right? So if I really have to, because water, I don't care about anything else, but I get a little desperate about not having water, right? I think it might come back a bit to my childhood. I'm not sure. So I don't know what you guys started out life, and I have told this story before, and if my Aunt Shirley and my Aunt Carolyn and my mother are watching, they will probably correct the details by, I'm guessing, about 100 today. I will get a call saying, no, that wasn't right. But I will tell you my recollection. When we were young, when I was young, our water in our house in Cape Breton came from a pump, right? And the pump came right up through the kitchen floor into a counter in the kitchen and a sink. And I know some of you may be familiar with this as a child. We got our baths on Saturday night in that sink, in the kitchen, which also happened to be the communal visiting place for the rest of the neighborhood. And in the winter, the entrance to the house. So I have these vague recollections of shivering in the sink while the door opens and snow blows in. You know, that kind of thing? Oh, we also had a wood stove, too, so it was always really hot in there, or it was really cold in there. But I can remember the sound of that, you know, first thing in the morning after the stove went on, right? There's the water coming in. Everybody must be, you know, getting up. It's time to get up. And, of course, the occasional worry about maybe it freezing, too, and priming it and all that kind of stuff. So I have a bit of a feeling about water, you know? It's important. And then in this house we live in now, we have this thing. You know what that thing is? What's that thing? No, some of you know. Nope. That is what's called an on-demand water heater. So instead of having a water tank, you have one of those. So what happens is when you open the hot water tap, then it triggers that thing to heat up and heats water as it goes through. So we have this lovely conversation in our house where my wife yells, "That thing's not working." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's not working? There's just cold water coming out of the tap." I'm like, "How long has it been on for?" "I turned it on a while ago." And I'm like, "It's not instant hot water, it's on-demand hot water." There's a big difference between those two words. So then I walk up, turn it on, and I'm like, "Feels kind of hot to me." Right? So we have this discussion on it because she's used to instant hot water, right? This thing is a lot cheaper than a hot water tank, right? But can't get it into her head. Always works for me, so I don't know what that is. Maybe I'm magic. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know what it is. But we have become so, you know, just dependent on these kinds of things just being there all the time, right? Not only that, we can drink out of the tap, right? We can drink out of our tap. Ever go to Mexico? What's the first thing they tell you? Don't drink the water out of anything, right? Unless it's in plastic, right? And Mexico's a civilized country. Think of some other places you go to, huh? So, somebody said to me years ago, they said, and I didn't believe them at the time, an engineer, he said, "One day in Canada, water will be more expensive than gas." And I thought he was full of baloney. You know water's more expensive than gas now? Right? What do you pay for a bottle? 500 milliliters. Pay over $1. Yeah, a liter of gas, 95 cents. You're paying $2 for a liter of water. In a country that has more fresh water than most of the world. And we'll go into a store and buy a case of it. Right? A case of water. And we pay more for that than we do for what we just put in our tank. And we don't think anything of it, like we don't make any connection about that whatsoever. I think it's fascinating. Give a stranger a drink. In a country like ours, it's not a big deal. Not only that, with the COVID-19, nobody would take it. Right? Would you give a stranger a drink? Probably not. Right? Not out of your own glass. I made that mistake once, speaking of Mexico. I went on this group tour with Queen's theological students, and we were supposed to go look through at systemic poverty in Mexico. So we went up to mountain villages and squatter settlements. It wasn't a tour of recreational sites. It was watching people who were dying of malnutrition and people who were living in villages without water. I was up in about 5,000 feet in this mountain village, and they had a basketball court. And I decided I would play the locals basketball at 5,000 feet elevation. I don't know if you've ever done any exercise in 90-degree weather at that elevation before. And I'm not that fit, and I wasn't then. So I started to get a little dizzy after a while. So we had water in bottles, and I drank water out of a bottle, and then there was a little guy next to me just sort of sitting looking up at me. And I'm like, "Want some water?" So he guzzles the water down, gives it back to me. I finish it off. Had a parasite 2 weeks later. Wasn't a pleasant thing. So don't share your water when you're in Mexico ever. Just a piece of advice for you. So I felt good about giving him a drink, and he gave me a gift back. So, okay. Oh yeah. So you remember this one? What is that, right? Okay, that is a pig's snout, right? And it's one of those big pig trucks, and an animal activist gave the pigs a drink because they were parked in a parking spot somewhere, baking in the sun, and then she got arrested for doing it. She got charged and arrested because you're not allowed to tamper with wildlife when it's in transit. The woman actually got charged for giving the pigs a drink. I don't think she did any jail time over it, but just the idea and the culture. I mean, they're going to slaughter. Like they weren't going off to be raised in a luxury or something like that. They were going to the slaughterhouse. And this woman came along and sprayed. She had a water bottle with a sprayer on it, and she was trying to give them a drink, and she ended up going to jail over the act of kindness. So I thought that was a fascinating kind of thing. So we do this in Canada. I don't know if you've ever been involved in these. We do wells in Africa, right? Rotary does a lot of that. Other service clubs do as well. Raise money. A group of people go to Africa, put in a well. Many places in Africa, people have to walk for miles to get water. I should say people. Women. Yeah, I just wanted to be clear about that. Women walk for miles to get water. Never seen a man in Africa with a bucket on his head before, but I've seen lots of women with those on their heads, and they go get water. So what they find happens when you put a well in a village like this, they're not hard to find. They don't have to dig down very far. They just don't have the technology for it. People start growing crops, start being able to raise animals dependably so. Village flourishes. The next thing you know, they're able to do some schools and some education. Things change dramatically. But it's interesting that we're always thinking about doing it in Africa, right? So the other fact I'd like to draw your attention to this morning is in 400 of 618 First Nations in Canada were under at least one water advisory between 204 and 214. That's 3/4 of the First Nations communities. So that means an underwater advisory means they have to boil their water before they drink it. So they can't brush their teeth with it, can't wash their face with it, can't drink it, can't cook with it, unless they boil it. So that means every household on that reserve and community has to do that until that's lifted. And I don't know about you, if I lived in a house where there was a boil advisory, I'm not sure I'd be comfortable when they said it's over that I'm now going to not boil my water, right? So that's 3/4 of First Nations communities in Canada live like that. And that's just between 204 and 214. Today there are 2,900 First Nations homes under long-term drinking water advisories, meaning residents have been able to drink water from their taps for at least a year, if not longer. I find the statistic almost ridiculously difficult. And I think one of the things that's hard for us to recognize, because we see sometimes as predominantly Anglo-Saxon folks, we see them as adults, and we think they should be able to take care of themselves, but we have to recognize they're children and adolescents. So they can't go to the tap. They can't go and get water. And a lot of these communities are communities that are isolated, so bottled water is a luxury or a scarcity, whatever way you look at, especially in communities where mobility is restricted depending on the time of year. And this part is the part that really sort of plagues me. If you, Canada has 7% of the world's renewable fresh water. 7% is a lot. And it's easy for Canadians to assume they have almost endless supply of clean, fresh water. We're told that Canada has 20% of the world's total freshwater resources. So the folks who live on reservations often, which I think is the great irony, are standing on the edge of rivers and lakes and oceans that are clean. And other than walking down to them and putting a cup in, they can't access it. They can't access it for their homes. They can't access it for washing or bathing or cooking. I talked to an engineer once who'd been up to one of the northern communities, because I did spend some time in the north, and he said the problem in the community was when they engineered the septic system and the water system, they built the septic system above the water system. Federally funded, of course. I said there's no way the federal, because they just built it, there's no way the federal government's ever going to go in and redo it, because now they've got to go to another place that's been 20 years waiting. Like, it's just mistake after mistake, right? It's poor attention and good money put after bad money. We see these pictures all the time. The next one here, right? We see this all the time. And when I listen to the newscast, the words always sound so nice, and I think they're honest. Like, I don't think they're disingenuous, but I think it's so hard to tackle all the problems that I think what happens to politicians, they're like, oh, I just got 2 years left, right? I'll just make the 2 years. I'll just do whatever little thing I can. I'm not going to be able to tackle everything. And for the rest of us, because they're not our issues, we don't deal with them. And we just hear them over and over again. We see this all the time: respect indigenous peoples and Mother Earth. Water equals life. And that's where I go back to the beginning of the sermon and the beginning of the gospel. We take water so much for granted, we wouldn't know what to do if we didn't have access to water. Our life would come crumbling and grinding to a halt. So I draw back to the gospel lesson. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these, who is mine, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. I don't have any solutions for what we should do for our Indigenous brothers and sisters. I really don't know. The problems are so vast. But the one thing I do know is there's one small thing. We can encourage our politicians, and when we vote the next time in the next election, at least to do something about the water. It's a primary thing. It's not partisan. It doesn't have any political impact. It's not better than this or worse than this. It is a primary function of life. And for the rest of us Canadians, it would be an easy thing to say, at least that part of racism I understand. That is racist. And we can do something about that. Thank you.